it's time. So first of all, my warm greetings to the audience, my warm welcome to our speakers. I am Marin Iuga, I am your host for today. I'm the moderator of this panel, and together with Mr. Gerard and Melo, who is a professor at Hasso Plattner Institute, together with Mr. Ovidiu Ortan, who's director of project at Emerson, and together with Mr. Radu Orghidan, who's the VP Cognitive Science at Endava. We are going to discuss a topic which basically influences the third part of our active life. It's about the workplace and about the way the workplace would be affected by the disruptive changes in AI. So let me start this panel with half of a story, and I'll tell the other half at the end of it. In this half of the story, it's actually a century-old story. It's called Rosum Universal Robots, and it's the story we introduced in the, let's say, global language, the global vocabulary, the word robot. And this story starts by a scientist discovering a sort of protoplasma, which he can use to make at the beginning animals, dogs, just play with creation. Drawing parallels is like us discovering the algorithms, discovering the data analysis, and start playing and creating and modeling your world. His son quickly sees the potential of this discovery and creates workers. That's from where the word robot comes, which work, actually forced labor in that whole, and creates robots who are very cheap to create. And the goods they produce, the services they provide are 1/5 of the cost of those provided by humans. Robots at that point have no feeling, no desire. They have only one purpose: to work. That's everything they have. Protagonists in the story discuss about robots having soul, giving rights to them, and so forth. But robots seem so uninterested about this that they give up. In the second act, 10 years later, robots are everywhere. Robots have become more complex. The old robots who just did the simple thing, some very specialized work, now can work on various tasks. They are even used to fight wars. So people don't have to die in a war, just robots. But on the other hand, the number of robots multiplied and the number of people, of humans, is just going down, of birds and so forth. And suddenly robots exhibit the first sign of self-awareness. They have pain receptors, they feel threatened, they feel encouraged, they have a conscience of themselves. And this is the first part of the story. And I will tell the second part in the end. And I would like at the end to ask every one of these speakers, how do you think the story should end? Because we have some parallels here, right? We have discovered algorithms, we are modeling with them the world, the knowledge. We have created narrow AI, the first type of robotic beings, right? Doing very specialized work, have a narrow applicability, like appliances. Soon we dream about basically universal AI, AGI, right? Doing lots of stuff, being able to be used everywhere, bringing us a technical utopia, right? Where we live like kings, while robots work for us, right? We can dedicate to our human side and human needs more and more. And therefore, with this, let's say, obsession of humanity for a worker, it frees the human from his condition, having to do manual work or repetitive work. I will go first to Mr. Gerard. Do you think that we are living this parallel now? Do you think we are starting to AI at work?
Well, we're definitely putting AI to work, but I'm a bit more skeptical about the claims that there will be conscious AI. That's a whole nother level. So AI will get better and better at serving our needs. And the bigger risk is when humans decide to use AI for evil purposes. That could be a risk. It's already happening now. So the problem is it's a very powerful tool that serves our needs, but can also serve bad needs. But I don't think we need to worry about the AI taking over on its own. Mostly it will be people controlling AIs who could use it for bad purposes.
Indeed, Mr. Gerard, and I think you have prepared a very positive view on how the robots will change our workplace.
Okay, yeah. So let's
look at let's say the sugar in the lemonade.
Right.
Let's see what is the nice.
Okay.
part.
Are you able to see my slides?
Yes.
Yep. All right.
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, I've prepared a few thoughts about what I think is going to happen in the near future. So not talking about these very long-term scenarios, mostly about current observations and near future developments. So as mentioned, I'm an academic. So I work at the Hasso Plattner Institute and University of Potsdam in Germany. So we do research in many things. One example is customer service bots. So if you have people requesting help, then the service bot tries to first answer their question or ask some clarification questions. And only if they cannot serve the user's needs, then the customer gets transferred to a real human agent. And so these kinds of save a lot of time and cost and are already being deployed by many companies. And related kind of thing, recent development in AI is when we chat with a friend and say, hey, let's meet up for coffee soon. And then comes the painful part. Everyone's busy. What kind of place do we work out? What time and date works well for both of us? And so one of the things that has already existed for a couple of years now is you can just CC this Amy at x.ai service, and the service will automatically access your calendar and negotiate a good date and time with the other person. So you don't need to spend so much time with this back and forth. So these are just some developments of AI. Another one is actually also design and creativity. So people used to think AI is not creative. It can just do very simple, mundane tasks. But it turns out that is not really true. So one of the things we've been working on is automatic selection of colors, of fonts, of images. There are also other examples of people developing services to generate lyrics for songs. Hip-hop lyrics, where you need rhymes, are often assisted by computational techniques. And so a lot of new opportunities are arising. Even in journalism, there's this article that was written entirely by a bot called GPT-3. It's very powerful, and the humans basically just have to select a few out of a couple of answers, select the best ones, but most of the writing, all of the writing was done by the bot. And these systems can even do very advanced things, such as figure out what a certain philosopher would think about a certain concept, or give you long, detailed advice if you have some psychological problem or issue or any general thing where you need some assistance. They can write a quite detailed text giving advice. And so these are just some of the developments recently. But there are also very big challenges, not just opportunities. So there are a bunch of different challenges. I'm just going to mention one such challenge. So imagine you are in prison and now they're going to decide parole, whether you get to leave prison early, and finally you get the result back and it says, no, you're not able to leave prison because an algorithm predicted that if they let you out, you probably will commit a crime with some probability. And so these systems are actually already being used in the US. And this can be a risk because now we don't always know what these algorithms are looking at, why they're making this decision. A related example is agents, AI being used to automatically grade student essays, and that determines then into which university you get accepted into. And also in HR, human resources, a lot of people are using AI to filter out the most promising applicants. But the problem is that these algorithms might be picking up the wrong signals or very biased signals. For example, if you grew up in a certain city, then maybe the probability is lower simply because in the past, lots of people from that city did not perform well, but that shouldn't really affect your assessment. So these algorithms can be very biased and look at the wrong signals. One of the solutions is to move towards more explainable AI so that we can trust the AI more. There are different ways of doing this. You can provide textual descriptions, explanations of why the algorithm is doing something. In our work, we've been creating these network diagrams where we show what is the connection between the user and, for example, a product that we're recommending the user to buy. And then the user can see, okay, this is why this recommendation is being made, this is why this decision is being made, and that can be helpful. So basically, AI is just a tool and it needs to be used very carefully. Sometimes it's the wrong tool for the job. Sometimes it's too powerful, and it may not always be a good thing to use. So finally, I'll talk briefly about some implications for the workplace. So this is a chart, plot showing the top jobs in different states in the USA. They excluded two major categories, which was managers and salespeople. But apart from those two categories, you can see the top jobs in 1980. In many states, there were top jobs such as farmer or secretary, and also machine operators in industry. And now if we look at 2015, the situation has changed quite massively. So a lot of the machine operating jobs have moved away. Industry has often moved to Asia or other countries that have more affordable labor. Then certain jobs such as secretary are no longer needed as much because of AI. And here in 2015, you can see truck drivers are very popular jobs because truck driving is not something you can outsource to a completely different country. So there's a lot of truck driving, but of course people are working on this. So there's research on self-driving vehicles. There's been a lot of progress on these self-driving vehicles recently. And so we can expect that there also jobs will be getting reduced to some extent. So you can have people monitoring multiple vehicles at once instead of having one driver for each vehicle. Another example, travel agencies. Now, you still need a lot of travel services, but the traditional agencies are needed less because we do a lot of online bookings. So AI, again, is just a tool and it can do a lot of things, but I should mention it cannot do all of the things that we want it to do. And so for adoption, it's not going to immediately replace all of our jobs because there are many jobs that AI cannot immediately be deployed for. There's a big gap between what AI can do and what we need AI to sometimes do. So general trends for the workplace include more online collaboration. Of course, now also with COVID-19, there's a lot of work from home, but also there's been a general trend towards cloud collaboration tools, big international teams that work in different locations spread out across the globe. And related to this, I believe there'll be a lot more project-driven work. So consulting companies that get hired just for one particular project, online marketplaces where you just hire people for a single job, a single task, and there's this general gig economy kind of trend. All right, so in the future, I think AI will give us greater productivity, new opportunities, less dependency on human translators, for example. There's another tool where you just type in a single sentence and the system turns the single sentence into a long email that is more polite and better written. And so basically, I think that for regular office jobs, what AI will mainly do is give us more productivity, the ability to do new things. There's this tool where you can create an AI video in just 1 hour. So the person does not really exist. It's an animated character, but looks quite real, and the lips move according to whatever you wanted to say, and the speech is synthesized. And so these kinds of tools allow you to do things in 1 hour instead of days. And so more productivity, new opportunities, but not displacing all of our jobs. It's just going to change the way we do certain jobs. And so I'll end with this final example of managers and their jobs. So Ginny Rometty, the former IBM CEO, has said that in the future, every decision that mankind makes is going to be informed by an AI, basically. And this is something that applies also to top-level managers. Instead of just relying on your intuitions and your past experience, you can draw on AI that in turn draws on much more information and can analyze the markets. And so a lot of our decisions become better, become more informed, but we will still need managers and regular people to control these processes and help us ensure that everything works out well. All right, that was my brief overview. So let's discuss some of the issues here. I raised a lot of points.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Gerard, for very informative presentation. I think one of the questions in the cycle of the society is, would we be replaced or would we be held by the AI?
Right.
And what can we do? What can the education system do to prevent, let's say, the humans to become irrelevant in the workforce of the future? So what do you think?
So I already mentioned this a little bit in my talk. There are certainly jobs that will become less relevant. So just looking at the past, we no longer need as many people in farming. We no longer need hands-on machine operators. There are different kinds of industry jobs that are needed more nowadays. And so this trend will continue with secretaries, personal assistants, certain kinds of research jobs. So in general, we see that the more repetitive and routine tasks are easier to automate using AI. And so that's where education comes in, because education helps us to advance our skill sets to something that is then less routine and maybe more advanced. That does not mean that we all need to go and study AI and study computer science. Basically, we just need skills that cannot be automated, but the actual AI will still be easy to use. These are regular tools that could be an app on your phone, that could be a web interface. So we just need to be adept at using these different tools that are made available to us, but we don't need to know everything about AI and all the mathematics behind this. Of course, education will also have to change, because as if you think back, mostly in the past, we've had these long 3-year degrees, 4-year degrees, even longer degrees. And in the future, there'll be more shifts, people who want to switch from one job to another job, but cannot afford to spend another 4 years just studying. So we'll need more flexible kinds of education, lifelong learning, boot camps, and online courses, of course, are already being used by many people. So there'll be a lot more dynamics in education in the future.
Thank you. Mr. Radu, what do you think that the fact that we are basically more and more subject of algorithmic decision will bring to the, let's say, the consumer, the society? This is a very interesting question for many.
Sorry, can you repeat the question? So if we are more subject...
more and more affected and subjected by the algorithmic decisions. And instead of humans deciding for us, we have algorithms deciding for us. But how do you think the society, how does the customer must, let's say, adapt to this effect? How do you think? How do you see it? And that is the same, Mr. Ovidiu, because both of you.
So I think the algorithms are just a reflection of ourselves. They are just a mirror of our society. And when we say algorithms decide, actually they're using their universe that we created through the data that we fed in. So we should be careful at what kind of data we're using. We should be, this is very difficult to verify. So I think we should be careful of how we test the algorithms before letting them in the wild. And also there is the question of the continuously evolving loop. When you apply an algorithm that starts to have an impact on society, then you need to be aware that that society will change. So that algorithm will become obsolete in not a long time. So that's another thing to take into account, like this kind of double loop learning that we must be aware of. And well, this is not a simple question. It's just you have to be constantly looking at what is taking the decisions and what trends our society follows.
Excellent. Mr. Ovidiu, how do
I was actually thinking when you were starting your half of the story in the beginning whether we're going to get into the iRobot movie of Will Smith or not. But I would personally, I would say we're quite far away from that, and I think we're at the stage that, and we will be for a long time at the stage that Gerard was mentioning around the fact that this technology is here to help. So we're not really at the stage where this technology is going to take over, right? We're still controlling it, and we're still setting up the parameters of what we want it to do, right? And it generally helps, and it adds more and more to what we're doing. But personally, I think we're quite far away from this taking over. That's my view.
So the impact is rather minimal, you would say, at this point.
Minimal, generally positive, right? So it's here to help us, and it's going to continue like that. It's just because I trust humankind is there to develop it in such a way to keep it safe, right? And controllable, of course.
Thank you. Interesting point as well. It's a very divided vision in the society. Let's say the Oriental society is more comfortable with robots. They have more anthropomorphism.
And don't forget that there's more and more trends nowadays that take humans, let's say, back to the roots, right? So away from technology and back to a normal way of work or classic way of living. So it can go both ways.
Yeah, we just in the West we see the robots as tireless machines. We created the Terminator concept. And the last question on this topic, since we begin to be more and more affected by algorithmic decisions, we will ask for the right to understand what happens. Do you think that AI decisions can be explainable to general society?
Yeah, so definitely we need to be able to trust algorithmic decisions and In the European Union, there's also a right to get an explanation if for certain kinds of algorithmic decisions in the GDPR law. And so basically, we need to have ways to ensure that the algorithms are doing what we want them to do. Now, the problem is there are these algorithms that we try to make interpretable, and that can be very tricky because sometimes just to produce one decision, you need to do millions of computations. The computer is doing millions of computations, and no human can check all of those computations to really see what happened. And so interpretable AI is kind of a difficult direction because some decisions are simply too complicated the way the computer actually does them. But different from interpretable AI, there is also explainable AI. And for that, it's different in that you don't really want to understand every little tiny detail of what the algorithm is doing. Rather, you want the algorithm to serve human needs. You're telling the algorithm, please provide me some good reasons for this decision. And these reasons should be useful and understandable to a human. And it may not reflect exactly what the algorithm did, but this is more compatible with, let's say we have an algorithm make an initial decision, but if someone complains, we have a human looking at the case and coming to a final decision. And this human can then look at these reasons given by the algorithm. So we need explainable AI, but interpretable AI can also help in some cases where there are very clear reasons that can be that an algorithm can use.
And I think there is quite a big difference between how explainability or interpretability of AI is in Europe compared to US. In Europe, you demand the right to explain. Doesn't matter if you don't understand, it will be explained to you. That's another topic. In US, they believe that explaining AI is quite pointless. One, because it's too complex. Second, it's untractable. You cannot trace all the little information. And third, it infringes on intellectual property. By simply explaining your algorithm, you are exposing your intellectual property. However, they basically approach it from a different angle. They'll ask a human expert. If the human expert comes to the same decision, that you have not been discriminated. So basically, the proof of non-discrimination, in case of, let's say, justice, truly matters, it's basically your case is examined again by a judge. If the algorithm has a, let's say, 99 coherence with the human judgment, then the algorithm is valid and non-discriminatory. This is another approach. And anyway, we've seen the sugar in the lemonade. We've seen how AI promises us, let's say, a technological utopia. We've seen that doing better, faster, and freeing us for more creative. But we all know that there are very few, let's say, free things in this life. They come to a cost. And that's what Mr. Radu will present us. What is the cost, actually, for having the AI?
Exactly. Do you see my screen, my presentation?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
So I'm going to go really quickly through a lot of things that I wanted to share today. I hope it's not too long. And the presentation is focused on no free lunch when reshaping work using augmented intelligence systems. What I mean here is there is, as Mr. Marin said, there are hidden costs everywhere. So let's see what are the costs. So first of all, we have two things when dealing with AI, building it or using it. Usually we are on one of the sides. And I'll finish up by some conclusions and takeaways. And the free lunch is that story of American restaurants that used to lure in customers using the promise of a free lunch, and allegedly they were using more salt than usual so that the customers were buying more drinks. This is a metaphor that has been afterwards used in economics quite a lot. But in the machine learning domain, there is also no free lunch theorem, which says that we have no basis on which to choose one algorithm over the other, considering that they perform identically on all possible problems. This means we have to take into account exactly the data or the context that we're working in if we want to choose an algorithm. Let's start quickly by defining some terms. Machine learning is a set of algorithms that is used to perform a task without being explicitly programmed. Rather, it's using some patterns that it finds in the data. Or put it more poetically, a way to automate the ineffable, a phrase attributed to Casey Kozyrkov. Then the narrow AI, which was discussed previously, are those algorithms that are designed to solve narrow problems, like playing chess or recognizing a cat. And there is the famous AGI, that artificial general intelligence, also called the singularity, which is supposed to have self-consciousness and is supposed to help us or doom us, depending on the side we are in. Machine learning actually is the engine that powers artificial intelligence, but it requires lots of data. That's why I think we need cognitive computing. This is that part of AI which deals with computing near the data. We don't have to manage large volumes of data, but help the user augment their capabilities when they need it and where they need it. And therefore, cognitive computing redefines AI as augmented intelligence. It augments us instead of replacing us. It's, of course, powered by machine learning. So, as the previous speaker said, all we're dealing with are just tools. And the tools are better than us. A hammer is much better than us to smash a nail, but it will serve for nothing to if we want to use it as a screwdriver. So we're dealing with tools, and those tools are quite difficult to take over our society, but they can really help us. So here is a slide where I think machine learning can be understood quite easily, because it relies on some examples, and we can actually use AI with examples instead of instructions. And let's suppose somebody would like to understand if there is a cat in a picture, okay? And then asks a smart machine learning engineer, could you please build me a model that recognizes a cat in a picture? And there comes the engineer and builds an algorithm which indeed recognizes a cat. The problem is that the user was expecting another type of cat. He was thinking of a pet. Therefore, we can already see that there are some subtle things to take into account, such as the objective of the algorithm. And the objective is actually the goal towards which we would like to optimize the functionality of a system. But these objectives are subjective, as we just saw. They're subjective to the data, to the user, and so on. And the available data is usually biased. And to make things even more complicated, machine learning is generally suited for finding correlations within data rather than establishing causality. And this is the basis of an anecdotal story which says that we can find the causality between eating ice cream and an increased number of drownings, although this is just a correlation because both actions take place in summer. But yeah, if we're not careful, we can find out correlations that we mistakenly take for causalities. Let's look at some examples to make things more clear. For example, we can analyze images of products on a production line. This is called image classification, or detect also in images some tumors using semantic segmentation, typically done through convolutional neural networks. This is an algorithm that can identify where some disease is taking place. But not only images can be segmented. For instance, we can segment clients according to their response to different marketing instruments. And this is an example from Starbucks, where an algorithm, an unsupervised algorithm, clustered the customers in different regions depending on their response, as I said, to strategy marketing. Then we can use AI to forecast something depending on the data we have. For instance, here there's an example of forecasting company revenue using regression models, or creating chatbots to have customers interact with a robot instead of a human operator using natural language understanding or NLP components. An interesting thing here is that even for Google, there is no free lunch. There is recently a startup, PolyAI, which developed a model that beat Google in conversational applications. So this is a field in which Google didn't get all the benefits from his mighty model. Here are some takeaways from this first part. One of them is that there is no super algorithm that works for all data sets. Building and applying machine learning algorithms are totally different sports. And machine learning will deliver what we ask for, not necessarily what we want. So let's linger a little bit on building and applying machine learning algorithms, because we've been talking about building, and I'd like to show you some aspects of applying. When can business expect a free lunch using artificial intelligence? Meaning, when can we think that we get benefits quite for free? And it's interesting to look at the industry shift we have now from building models towards running models. And this is visible from Google search trends for machine learning operations, and also from the top fastest growing GitHub projects, which concern infrastructure, tooling, and operations related to machine learning. It's a clear trend that more and more businesses would like to take over and use AI. The most common deployed techniques are RPA and computer vision, which are leading the pack. And lagging behind a little bit are speech techniques, NLP, and physical robots, according to a study that I found by McKinsey company. What are the benefits of using AI and even of building AI? When we would like to have a solution, an intelligent solution, there are several aspects. We'd like to have more engaged customers. We'd like to transform our products, empower the employees to be able to perform better, and get some insights for operational optimization. All these are a loop that change the landscape and then have to be run again and again. But this is a problem. The expectation is that AI is some kind of a genie in the lamp that can solve all our problems. It can come up and just solve it. And we need to manage those expectations. How to tame this genie more than other in the mind of the end users or of the people that would like to apply AI. So there are several key elements. There is data availability, which I explained is part of the fuel of machine learning, to use an old saying. The AI talent, and the cultural challenges. And those cultural challenges are something that we're not talking enough, or we're not studying enough about. So what is needed is to have both aptitude and attitude. We need to have the aptitude to understand and provide the conditions for AI to work, but also the proper attitude to accept it and try to help it along. Uncertainty is acceptable, and this has to somehow be the norm when we're talking about AI. We need a good communication between all actors, and we need to support people, not replace people. This is one of the key ideas that have to be transmitted when using AI. And this is an interesting way of looking at innovation. There are usually two actors. There is the operational one and the innovation. The operational team are those guys that are smart, that have been building the business for the past 10, 20 years. They like predictiveness. They like to focus on profit. They're based on rules. They know how to do the things. And there come the other guys, which are also bright and full of optimism. They would like to collaborate. They understand that we're living in a continuously changing world, embrace ambiguities. And there is a gap between the two. There are some common values, but there is this gap that has to be somehow filled. And for this, we need the support at all levels of the organization. We need support from the directors, from the operational staff, and so on. And we need to expect some pushback from the participants. And there we are trying to implement innovation in between the two worlds. And something more scientific, this is a more consistent view proposed by Simon Wardley that I really like, both the view and his theories, is that people in organizations are along three categories. There are those pioneers, the settlers, and the town planners. And the products, they go from genesis to commoditization. Now, the pioneers deal with rare and poorly understood things. They are operating in a constantly changing and undefined market. The settlers are taking what the pioneers produce and grow it. They focus on high profitability. They are trying to obtain some more mature products. And then there come the town planners, those operational guys that I was talking about previously, which like to take things to a whole other scale. The pioneers are happy with failure. They understand experimentation with uncertainty, while the settlers prefer a constant improvement. They look at feedback, trend spotting, they're listening. And the town planners are focused on operational efficiency and analytics. They all use different methods. Pioneers use Agile, settlers use Lean, and town planners Six Sigma. So why am I talking about all this? Is because, well, they have different creative types and minds. But the thing is that we have to understand their culture. When you're talking about AI with a pioneer, you don't talk about the operational efficiency and the great scalability that it will help in the company, because they're interested in something else. And the town planners, on the other, are also interested in a different way of looking at it. So I think that's really important to understand how we explain AI to different actors inside an organization. In this slide, I gave from one of Wardley's books, and that's really interesting how a product can travel from, for example, this, I was thinking of a drone example of a small flying object, which is nowadays kind of a commodity. And let's imagine we're at position 1. We have the drone, and we'd like, town planners would like to sell it on a large scale. Therefore, what they do, they bring the project into the rapid team development for the pioneers to enhance it. And let's think about computer vision, right? We can use a camera with a smart device to detect something in images. We don't know exactly what. We have many techniques to do it. We can do image segmentation. We can do object identification. So we're now in point 2, and we're moving towards the third dot into the finding a mature, more concrete product. And here the drone can be used in different ways and see the feedback from the public. And maybe we find out that drones are very useful in agriculture. Let's say the market response is that drones are great for surveying the crops. Therefore, we are now in position 4 when we can sell at larger scale drones with smart vision for agriculture. This is an example of constant evolution in organization and how the 3 groups work together. Some takeaways. Culture eats strategy for breakfast, one saying that I really like. And as a conclusion and wrap up, I would like to highlight the fact that simplistic solutions fail because they are not holistic or creative enough. The goal of AI is to become a commodity and to replace technology literate people with people literate technology, with technology that understands people. So we need a more holistic approach. We need to look at things from different angles as if we're dealing with a mechanism that has different wheels. We have to take into account data science, MLOps, some business domain expertise, the economical, social, and other gears of that mechanism that we need to build in order to successfully deploy an AI solution in the industry. And
very interesting.
Last 4 points
Very
that I would like to leave the audience with is that data is usually biased. Always we need to test our assumptions. The objective is subjective. Wish carefully. Be careful what we're wishing for. Culture is strategy for breakfast. We need to understand culture. And the last one, let humans do higher value work, augment humans. This is actually the last slide that I hope I managed to transmit from all this presentation. This is the condensation, the 4 points that I'm looking at every time I'm talking about AI. Thank you.
Definitely. Thank you as well, Mr. Definitely a lot of information for our audience. But let's focus a bit on the profile of our audience, which I think most of them are pioneers. I think most of them, that's why they participate in such events, want to have their own startup, own service based on AI. And let's look from the problem of cost. So starting an AI business costs you money, costs you talent, costs you data. You don't have money for everything. What would be your advice for a pioneer starting this business?
Taking the logical steps that I presented, the key elements for AI are the data, the AI talent, and the cultural aspect. So I think data is quite important. We need to have good data to deal with, but also data is available. So I think this is a moderate cost, but one of the first that should be taken into account. AI talent, I suppose, is the owner of the business that has an idea or can get some AI talent on board. But the most important thing is to find the cultural fit, to find the fit of the product they want to develop in the market. I think this is where I would focus my attention first and foremost. Not to find the perfect solution for the irrelevant problem, but to find one solution for a problem and then iterate until with the help of the feedback from the market, I get to a really good product, a robust solution that is than get traction. That's where I would focus.
Thank you. And Mr. Ovidiu, Emerson does a lot of applied things, right? And applied artificial intelligence, how do you see it? As a vertical in itself, possible business domain on itself, or more like a service?
I think it's definitely becoming a domain in itself, right? Because more and more people need it, and if the demand is there, there will be people like what you mentioned, some of the people in the audience as well that are pioneers in the domain. There will be people that will try and meet these demands. Not everybody can focus on developing their own solutions. Yeah, actually, a lot of the wasted cost that you referred to a little bit earlier is because people don't know what they need, right? So quite often organizations don't know what to apply, and they're not going to be experts in applying that, right? Therefore, they need others to do it for them, right? Because they got other priorities. Yeah. So I think the direction is quite clear. The need is there. I would even make an analogy. The market is there, yeah, for that, and I think it will become a domain in itself, and potentially there's a lot of room for development there, and business as well. Yeah.
It's very interesting because the advice we got yesterday is that consider AI as a service to other, let's say, organization, like the vegetation grows over a wall, right? The manufacturing, the automotive is the wall, and the AI just grows over it.
Yeah, when it grows opportunistically, it will cost money. It will be a waste of money if it's not done properly, and if it's not done according to a plan. Generally, what we've seen is that it will cost more than what it brings. Yeah, and there's even some surveys and statistics on that. That quite often organizations taking on this, it sounds good, yeah, all these technologies, artificial intelligence, machine learning, and so on, they take it on, not knowing how to apply it, not having the knowledge to do that, and then their efforts get wasted. So you need specialists that can advise in this.
Interesting. Mr. Gerard, humanity has invested now a lot in AI, right? And they envision the AI basically as something that can generally do something. Humanity has created descriptive AI, let's say, where it exposes the business, it creates visibility. It also created, in the time we are living, predictive AI. We can predict quite well what's happening or what's going to. But where humanity has failed so far is in the prescriptive AI. Imagining the AI will just optimize business processes without being explicit and holding. And then, how do you see the future? Do you think we are getting there?
Well, yeah, so I think these three different levels are all connected, because once you know how to describe a domain properly, then you can start predicting based on similar indicators how it might develop into the future. So similar kinds of models can be used for description and predicting the future. And then for prescription, it's basically the same kinds of algorithms, because once you are confident enough in your predictions about the future, that's when you can start using those predictions to see which decisions you can predict which decisions will lead to the best outcome. And first, you can just do that as some sort of informative additional indicator. But at some point, once we are trusting the machines enough and the decisions they're making, we can let the machine take over the steering wheel, basically. So this is already happening in self-driving cars now. At some point, we think in certain circumstances, they can be safe enough. So do we let the car control the steering wheel and take over? And this has also already happened in algorithmic trading. So, I mean, you need to be extremely fast, and so there's no time for humans to check every decision that an algorithmic trading system makes. Basically, you just hope that the system is going to make decisions that lead to profits, and then you let the algorithm purchase stocks and other financial products. So as AI gets better and better, we will increasingly be seeing AI being used, and it relates to also the discussion before about explainability. We need to be able to make sure the algorithm is doing the right thing and trust it.
So short term, you think we are going to see prescriptive AI taking over autonomously more and more aspects of our, let's say, social process.
But normally they take that over in a controlled way, right? So it's still controlled by the humans, because there's this other, even borderline ethical aspect of having different technologies, AI in particular, machine learning in particular, acting upon humans without their knowledge, right? And we know the stories about social media and so on that feeds you with information without you being aware or consenting to it, right? So that's that maybe we need to make a distinction there on that, as it can have side effect.
Let's not forget about the AI used for AI, like the generative adversarial networks that can predict if something is fake or if a prescription is maybe not in your best interest.
Yeah. Personally, I think in the relation between human and machine, the danger lies in the area of that AI brings you what you ask, not what you want. So consider that you ask an AI fast driving car to get you to the airport as fast as they can. It's very possible that the AI will just drive over pedestrian, go the wrong way just to get you there, and you'll get there badly hurt, and maybe next step is going to prison. But the AI just got you what you asked for. That's I think where the danger is, because AI basically doesn't have, as far as I know, built-in, let's say, ethics. It's not in the parameters. Haven't been trained to be ethical. AI is mostly, machine learning is mostly highly glorified optimization process, minimizing the loss function. We need technical. And if, let's say, compassion and if ethical and moral aspects are not in those functions, they will just be disregarded. And that's where the, let's say, human supervision should be. In the beginning, human supervision was just annotating data, providing examples so the machine can learn. I envision that in the future, human supervision will just guide for the ethical and human reasons that should be or limit actually the AI in its applicability. Otherwise, AI is a very powerful tool, but also a very powerful weapon. So it depends how you use it. And speaking about using, I know Emerson applies, and let's have the real story from the, let's say, front line of people that apply AI for the large.
Thanks. Let me quickly share
Mr. Ovidiu's topic.
And you can see. All right, thanks. So I've got a few slides, 5 or 6, so not more than that. On generally, I'll first try and set a little bit of frame of what I'm going to talk about, because it is a little bit specific, as an area of discussion for this subject. First of all, I'm considering the industrial domain as a whole in my discussion, and that's quite a broad term. There's different aspects of industry that run at different speeds in this subject. So So there could be differences, of course, between them, but just for the sake of an example, for people listening, just to imagine a little bit better, think of a chemical plant. Think of a refinery that, or I don't know, like a pharmaceutical plant that could produce some vaccines or something like that. Keep that in mind as an example of what I'm referring to at the moment. Then, secondly, I'll talk about digital transformation as a broader term that would include technologies such as AI or machine learning and so on. And that because this is what generally the industry is looking at the moment. That's the journey that a lot of the players in the industry are beginning to take, and they know this term as digital transformation, right? Although it's mostly and quite a lot of it is based on big data and how we process the data through artificial intelligence and so on. Yeah. Now, what we're talking about here is quite a traditional domain, right? So we're not talking about Silicon Valley companies that reinvent themselves every couple of years. We're talking about maybe manufacturers that have been operating in a certain way for decades. Yeah, they've been doing different improvements to their processes through automation, and then they've done small improvements, and they worked. That's also the reality. The problem now is that they are facing a disruptor in their domain, right? They need to step up. They need to make a step change, and quite extensively reinvent themselves. Yeah, and that's not always easy because these organizations are they've got different priorities, right? They've got stuff to produce. They've got to run a plant. They need to manage their supply chain. They need to manage their orders from customers, right? So their expertise is not in the innovation part of the screen that Radu was showing. It's more, their expertise is more in the operational part. Yeah. So quite often they either don't know what to do, or they end up spending their budgets. They end up spending their budgets on useless stuff, right? Or half of solutions that doesn't get them anywhere, right? And they can't really see the benefit quite often of what they're doing. So that is why these organizations need to take this into consideration very closely and plan it accordingly. Yeah, and create a certain strategy around the use of artificial intelligence and digital transformation. Yeah. There are some critical areas that generally these organizations need to look at. Yeah, and essentially, if you think about it, they're quite often they are people oriented, right? They have people as a beneficiary of these areas, or they have people at the center, right? So, for example, safety. Yeah, they really need to be careful now. They really need to be careful at safety. So the only acceptable target is 0 injuries, 0 incidents, right? So you need these organizations need to remove employees from hazardous areas, and they also need to pay attention to being safe on the IT side as well, right? They need to be cyber secure. Then they need to run the plant reliably. Yeah, and this is where artificial intelligence and machine learning and so on can operate on big data that can be taken from the plants, and decisions and patterns can be made based on this data before different parts of the plants fail, right? And then this is really essential, because a fail in a lot of these domains means a lot of money. Yeah. So probably can't imagine how much it would cost to have a failure on a refinery that you need to stop, right? This would actually need to run 24/7, 365 days per year, right? So that's the impact would be huge. Then on the production side, if they are able to plan their production and if they are able to adapt to the market demands, by using the data that is available out there, that will be the ideal scenario for them, right? If their supply chain is predictable and their efforts in sizing their production have a good impact, then their business is saved. Yeah. And the last but not least is, of course, the energy and emissions and the environmental aspect of what they're doing, right? They have to operate safely, but they also have to be able to predict or even and even avoid releases in the atmosphere that could harm it. Yeah, or they could even balance out the energy consumption if they have the right data in place. But and also at the bottom line of this is that it is very much around the people aspect of their plant. Yeah, and essentially a high-end technology like artificial intelligence based on proper data, as it was mentioned earlier, can enable these organizations to really make each of the employee function as their best employee, and then increase their efficiency quite a lot. Yeah, they can do automated error-free tasks. Decision making is much easier because the data to support it is there. Yeah, and then there's powerful analytics that can back everything up. So it's really something that that helps, let's say, the manufacturers of the future to run efficiently and safely and reliably. Yeah. Now, as I mentioned, we're talking generally about a traditional area, right, of expertise. It doesn't change overnight, and for probably 40 years since computers have been used in the automation domain, most of the manufacturers were in that left part of the chart, where what they needed is experts to come in their plant and look at their data and make some decisions on that. Yeah, so everything was local, everything was happening there. People were coming over and they were checking the data and they were making local decisions based on that. Yeah. Now, that has been, and maybe because to a certain extent it still is, and it will still be the traditional way of working for many companies. But in the recent years, we've seen a lot of the industry transitioning some of their operations into integrated operations center. Yeah, for example, in the power generation industry, they use these monitoring and diagnostic centers where basically the data is available for the people in the centralized place, even across different sites, and experts can look at multiple plants and then bring the expertise to centralized and expertise and actually consistent decision making in a centralized way. And then with the IIoT kicking in quite a lot, so the Internet of Things in the industrial domain, these services are able to move more and more to third-party expert service providers. Yeah, so basically the users of this, the operators of this plant can focus on their area of expertise, and they can let others take over their data, interpret it, take expert decisions on it, and then advise them what needs to be done. Yeah, and it is actually happening quite often. There are limitations there, of course. There's the processes are still the same, so they need to be kept safe, and they need to be they need to operate in an efficient way. But once this is done, and also once the cybersecurity aspect of this is solved, this data can then be transferred to others, and others can take decisions, do an analysis, use the technology, and then do the diagnosis of work instructions, even close the loop and actually do the work, come into the plant and do the work themselves. So more and more, the more we look at the operational performance, the more we're moving to the right, and the more we're actually using the available technologies in this domain. Yeah, and to close this with a few key takeaways, I would say the industry is adapting to the new technologies, although traditional, although more rigid and in their approach, they have to adapt in order to run safely, reliably, efficiently, and of course environmentally friendly. Technology investment is quite often seen as an investment in people, because it will generate an effect on the users. Yeah, each organization will need to choose their unique way of applying digital transformation and artificial intelligence. Yeah, and what their suitable balance between humans and technology will look like, and so that they remain productive. Yeah. But what will happen, and what we already see happening to a certain extent, is there will always be an obvious interdependency between human and digital workforce. By the way, we talk about digital workforce nowadays just as we talk about human workforce, and they need to coexist so that the end user, which is the industry, delivers to their customers, and then in the end to all of us in a suitable way. Yeah, and that will be the end of my presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Ovidiu. Very interesting presentation as well. But one of the things we always encounter when working with people is their culture, and especially when doing disruptive things, we affect their culture. So in Emerson experience with all the customers, do you think that embracing AI, adopting AI,
it does and it will, because first of all, the first discussion that needs to happen is with people, right? And people need to understand the benefit of it, right? And before they can understand the benefit of it for themselves, of course, it can be at different levels. They need to a certain extent, change their mindset. Yeah. So, but a good example in this domain would be, and it actually reflects on the people, not on just the management that is doing the decision, but on everybody working in the domain. A good example would be, think of an engineer or a maintenance technician that is used to, as their activity for 20 years is used to go around the plant and check the motors, check the valves, check the instruments, check the reactors, see if they're in a good shape. He sees that, right? He sees, and he's comfortable with the decisions he's making. Now these guys, they need to, basically what they're going to get a tablet in their hand, and they're going to get a schedule of maintenance or a graph on when their assets will fail, and they need to trust this technology as well, right? Because it will still be part of their job, but it's a basic shift to it, right? So they need to culturally change as well. To what extent? It depends on it depends quite a lot on the area and the organizations.
Mr. Radu explained us a bit. There is a bit of operational and innovation gap. So, Mr. Ovidiu, are you closing that gap?
It is difficult for most of these organizations to close it themselves. As I mentioned, they've got other stuff to do, right? They've got deadlines, they've got contracts, they need to deliver stuff. They need to manage their supply chain that changes, they need to manage their competition. they don't have too much time to innovate themselves, right? And I was mentioning a little bit early, this is where probably there's room, and there will be still maybe more room for others to do that for them, because they will own this expertise globally, right? We're talking globally now. We're not talking just about one plant, right? It's difficult to do it in an isolated way. That's the view. So I would say, in very rough terms, others will need to do it for them.
Interesting. Mr. Radu, you have the same challenge. Endava is a global IT service provider. There is IT, there is innovation. Otherwise, they disappear.
Well, I think Endava is an example of an innovative company that can do innovation for itself. So I think the interesting thing would be to look at how we manage to collaborate with customers from the industry, because inside we don't have quite as much that gap. But when we're talking to a big customer, what we're looking at is, as I said, a holistic perspective of their situation. It's not just a narrow problem, because many times if you want to digitize a small problem, then you end up by having a bad process with well digitized. So we should actually change the process from its root, even change the process itself, and that will imply another cultural shift in the minds of the people, because they would maybe accept doing on the tablet what they were doing previously on paper. But the thing is that usually they have to forget about everything they were doing and do it in a completely more different way, but more efficient. So in order to push this change, we're doing it by bite-sized chunks, so step by step, with low, little by little, but also having a global objective in mind. So we know together with the management where we want to get, where we want to arrive, and then we implement the change from multiple directions slowly, or we manage to make it accepted, but by all levels of the organization. And this is really important, because a good product, a good AI product can fail if it's not used properly by the workers. That's there are many examples in the history.
Yep.
Mr. Gerard, I have a question for a scientist. Do you think that AI at workplace will be adopted globally through all the strata of the society? Or do you think it rather will be pockets of, let's say, innovation and high technology?
Well, I think it will affect basically a large percentage of the global population, because when we think of AI nowadays, we look at some of the research achievements and new technologies. We think of it as a very pioneering topic, but there is also AI in our phone. There's AI every time you do a Google search, there is some AI happening in the background. And so over time, AI becomes a commodity that becomes very easy to use. It's just an app in your phone or some cloud tool that you use. And actually, AI makes certain processes easier to do than without AI. So before, you had to become a Photoshop expert to remove some object from a picture that you took. Now there are tools where you just mark some object or tell the computer even remove that barrier from my picture, and the computer can do it for you. And as these technologies become more available, they will become available also globally. So we see that in all parts of the world, people have mobile phones. They use their mobile phones for everything. I spent many years in China, so there, even people who don't know how to use a computer, who don't have an email address, even they are ordering things online and using some apps that are based on AI. So it will affect all of us at some point.
Very interesting point. And now the question where I would like an answer for each one of you. So at the beginning of our panel, we started with half of a story. In this story, just drawing parallels, the humanity discovers the algorithmics, discovers how to make robots, things that are theoretically improving their life. And these things, these, let's say, objects, appliances, how they are calling the story, become self-aware.
Well,
Mr. Ovidiu, how do you think?
Well, the engineer in me would say that it's got to end with perfect robots that can serve us perfectly. In reality, I think it will be a balance between usage of these robots or technologies and so on, and human common sense, right? That will still need to that will still need to exist. Although subjective, it will still need to continue, because quite often it's what makes us enjoy life, right? So that will still remain. So I would say a balance between those almost perfect robots and humankind.
Well, this is not a prepared session,
Radu,
so
how do you think?
I can imagine that I would end the story by a blend between humans and those robots. They finally, if they have feelings, they'll end up by falling in love with some humans, and there will be some kind of a blend, and a new species will appear.
Interesting.
Well,
Here is
so
the
as I mentioned, I don't think we
Mr.
will
Gerard,
get
how do you
conscious
think?
AI. We will get AI as tools that serve our needs, that basically at some point we don't need to do any work. We have the robots bringing us cocktails and generating free entertainment for us, all automated, the robots doing all the factory work and so on. Of course, there's also the risk that people misuse AI, but we need to regulate these things. We need to find common solutions. We need to make sure that the big tech companies also pay their fair share of taxes, so that we can have this lifestyle without having just joblessness as a big problem. So in the end, I think it will be a very positive outcome, but we need to make sure that things don't go in the wrong way, but not due to evil AI, just due to people who misuse AI.
All of you imagine the world in a much positive way that the author of the story sent on the current chapter. In the awesome universal robots, it was bringing us the word robot in the global vocabulary. In his story, the robots become self-aware and they realize their condition and revolt against humanity, and even destroy humanity, and along with humanity destroys the very formula that makes them live. One person is, however, spared in that story. It's the chief architect, how we will call it, a software companies. And he's asked again to produce the formula, but he doesn't know it. And he plays on the bad side of humanity and say, I need to dissect robots so I can learn. And before doing that, he observes that two robots, Primus and Helena, develop human feelings, develop love one to each other. And they want to sacrifice. He tries to dissect Helena, but Primus protects her. Helena says, take me. And somehow concedes that the robots, the AI, as we say, are the next evolutionary step in the humanity. And he concedes the right to, let's say, have the earth, the new creation, to the new Adam and the Eve, which are those two robots? It's a very interesting question because that brings up 2 points here, the point of singularity and the point of transhumanism. We think that at a certain point AI will transcend the things we can program it, learn it. We will become aware of itself. Yeah. In the other side of the story, we think that humans will use AI to transcend human conditions, the transhumanism. So we've seen so far 3 mainstream positionings in the relation between humans and AI. Let's say low-level one, we think AI will be just a tool to serve us. That's let's say the common, most obvious thing to say. However, on the other side of the story, we think that the AI system, the digital workforce, will be just our partner, equal. And we will work together to a future society. And of course, we have the third mainstream position, where we think that AI will somehow enslave us, will just basically make us obsolete. However, beyond those 3, let's say, mainstream positioning, there is a 4th position, which they say that the AI will evolve in a way that will be such alien to us that we won't recognize it. It will just happen. In the same way, like a virus is not aware of the dreams, of the thoughts, of the desires of his human hosts. We are just that virus living potential in a very complex alien intelligence, which is the artificial intelligence we create. And that intelligence will be not communicable to us. We will not understand. It might have happened already, but we just don't know. So these are very, very interesting points because the work relation defines actually the partnership between human and his creation, artificial intelligence. And all of the questions that society has, I'm not talking about scientists, technicians, I'm talking about the society at large. All of these questions are questions related on how the human being will be in rapport with his creation, or will position. Helper, it will be a slave, or will just help the human to transcend his human condition. It could be very pessimistic and it could be very optimistic. We don't know. The time will tell us. In any case, I would like to thank our audience for the time here, and I would like that each of the speakers just give a short presentation or thoughts on whatever they like to say as a closing statement.
Yeah, well, we can only thank the audience and you, Mr. Iuga, for organizing this for us. Very interesting discussion. Also, in preparation for it, it created a bit of a thought process that was quite interesting to see. Hopefully, we're going to stick to what we all said. That we're going to have a healthy balance between human and machine, and hopefully next year or in 2 years when we talk about it, it didn't change too much or along our lifespan. But anyway, thanks to everybody, and yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Also, very interesting session, and I'd like to tell the audience that I'm open to discussions. I really like this domain, so if anybody wants to discuss technical problem or a philosophical one, we can have virtual coffees that are easier to get than physical ones, but that can bring some new ideas on the table. So I'm open to further questions and discussions over the next days and months. And thank you for your invitation.
Yes, also from me, thanks to the audience. Very interesting session, lots of interesting thoughts, and I'm sure there's reason to be optimistic, at least for the near future. AI will improve our lives in many ways, and there are many new opportunities for us to investigate. So feel free also to reach out to, I assume, all of us if you have further thoughts and comments.
Cluj Innovation Days 2020 is part of the Future Skills lifelong learning program. The project is co-financed from the European Social Fund through the Human Capital Operational Program 2014-2020.